I did talk about how Hannibal Barca is one of my favorite people from history, and so I thought I would make a follow-up video where I actually talked about Hannibal Barca, his story, and why he's one of my favorite historical figures. I think off to the side of this, I will have a splash of a poster in my room that I have of Hannibal Barca that says "Yes, we Cannae," and it's a bit of a joke, which will be explained. But the Battle of Cannae is one of the most famous battles in all of antiquity, and Hannibal Barca killed a bunch of Romans. So, a quick little caveat, or just to kind of introduce the idea, is a lot of the information on Hannibal Barca, the historical information, is a bit skewed, and is maybe not so concrete because Carthage used to be a country, and it was very much destroyed by the Romans. And Carthage was kind of the last great enemy of Rome before Rome rose to power and eventually kind of destroyed itself in some sense. They were the last big adversary of a rising Rome. And so, in many ways, the history of Hannibal Barca is somewhat informed of that because there isn't really a Carthaginian history that's left behind. And to the extent Hannibal is known, he's kind of known through Roman histories, and he's kind of a boogeyman. He is he is the one you would tell your children about, like, oh, Hannibal Barca's gonna come if you don't eat your vegetables. And so that's a bit of it. Also, like the word Punic and punitive is supposed to be like unnecessary, like roughness or like sadistic, like type of thing. Punic just means Carthaginian, and so like we still have some of the words to that extent because they were obviously enemies. They were enemies before Roman Carthage were enemies before Carthage, before Hannibal's time. Just a little bit of back history. Carthage was originally a colony of Phoenicia. Phoenicia is in like modern day, like the Levant area, where I forget what country is there now, like north of Israel. There's this area where there was a country called Phoenicia, and Phoenicia founded a bunch of colonies across the Mediterranean. And apologies if I get some details wrong. This is largely from memory. But Phoenicia made a bunch of colonies all around the Mediterranean. And eventually Phoenicia gets pseudo-conquered by the Assyrians, I think. And they start to lose power. They were very powerful early on, like before Alexander the Great. So like way back. But Carthage rose up to power more. And so where Carthage is located is modern day Tunisia, which is like just south or southwest of Sicily. And it was an important trading hub for the Mediterranean because from north you went up to the Iberian Peninsula. You could also, or sorry, not Iberia, the Italian Peninsula. You go west, which is like reversed for you guys. You go to the Iberian Peninsula in Spain, which had important silver mines. You also have access to Sardinia, which had big silver mines at the time. And then obviously you have easy access to Egypt on the other side of the Mediterranean. So it's very centrally located. But importantly, it's kind of centrally located in the same way Rome is, which is basically just north of Carthage. And so major trading city, major trading hub, and Carthage and Rome have disagreements. They start out in like the First Punic War, which was not fought by Hannibal. It was fought by Hannibal's father, Hamilcar Barca. And Hamilcar, I forget how the First Punic War went exactly. My understanding is he was doing all right, but the Carthaginians were ruled. They were also a republican nation, along with the Italians, or not Italians, the Romans. And so Hamilcar was doing all right, but the Senate wanted to sue for peace. They did that, and they got a pretty bad peace deal, which made it so they couldn't make any navy. And this is really important because if you're a maritime, like, naval trading civilization, this is like pretty bad for you. And then secondly, it makes it hard for any Carthaginian to really get to Rome, right? Because there's a sea in the way. Well, okay. Hamilcar goes out and they expand a lot of Carthage's colonies in Iberia, which might have started out initially as Phoenician colonies. By now, Phoenicia is like kind of gone. But so Hamilcar expands in Iberia, which is modern day Spain, and really starts building up a large, infrastructure and coalition there. And I think this is one of the really interesting things about Hannibal, and it was also interesting about Hamilcar, is the Roman army is like, they're Romans. The Carthaginian army is an army that is just disparate, wide swath of different peoples. They're mercenaries. There are people from Iberia. There are people from Numidia. There are people from Carthage. Carthage, very importantly, to like emphasize, is it's located in North Africa, but ethnically they're not Africans, right? They are, eventually it's like mixed, but they come from Phoenicia, which is, I guess it would be more close to Greek, but it's not they're not ethnically the same as the people around them, like in Numidia and stuff. And so it was actually a huge task to organize this giant army that was comprised of different peoples. And so a big part of it, when Hannibal did it, or later, is this is a time period where it's shortly after the conquests of Alexander the Great, and a lot of people are, trying to liken themselves to Alexander the Great, and also a big part of let's call it propaganda is likening yourself to Hercules. So an example of something that Hannibal did is he minted currency with himself in the likeness of Hercules to try and build up his legend. And so, but Hamilcar has to deal with a lot of the same stuff where you're uniting all these different peoples. And I think this is an important part of Hannibal's legacy that I really like, is that he not only has to be a really good commander, he also has to be charismatic orator and present himself in such a way that all these people want to follow him, especially if they're just mercenaries, right? Because the trek was tough that they eventually go through, and I think a lot of mercenaries would want to tap out. And in my mind, his ability to keep this army together that had no business staying together was an incredible feat. But anyways, Hamilcar eventually dies in one of the Iberian battles, and Hannibal consolidates most of the continent, the southern portion of the continent, and then he attacks a city that is allied with the Romans, kind of, sort of. It's a little bit unclear. So the history is a little fuzzy. But he attacks a city allied with the Romans, and the Romans are like, hey, don't do that. And then Hannibal tells them to shove it. And so we have war again. So this is the Second Punic War, and this is the war that Hannibal mostly fought in, and or this is the Hannibal War. There's a Third Punic War, but we'll get to that. And so now Hannibal is the Romans are like, okay, we're just going to attack Iberia. Hannibal can't get to us, no boats. Or we attack Carthage. It's whatever. We're going to take care of this. And Hannibal instead, and this is perhaps the thing, he's really famous for two things, and this is one of them. Instead of waiting for them to attack Iberia or attack Carthage, what he does is he marches his army through Gaul all the way over up to the Alps, which were seen as not crossable, and he crosses them with a giant army that includes elephants. So he crosses over these high mountains with elephants. Tons of people die in this crossing, but he completely takes the Romans by surprise when he just pops out in the North Italian, northern Italy, with a giant army. There's a quote that is attributed to him, but once again, this is just a Roman writer saying he wrote it, writing he said it, right? Whereas I will either find a way or make one. And so he does something everyone thinks is impossible. He crosses the Alps, he crosses it with elephants, and now he's in northern Italy. And so the Romans are scrambling to try and fight him off, and he just starts terrorizing the area. And they eventually assemble an army. And there's a bit of a problem with the way the Romans are assembling armies as well, because they have a consul. I think it's like they have a consul who leads the army, and they have like 2-year terms. And so there's a lot of incentive for them to try and get things done fast, that because it's politically expedient for them to do so, right? They want to get it done before the term is over. And Hannibal exploits this to kind of lure them into bad situations, and he ambushes armies a lot. And the biggest one, which I include I might have a like splash off to the side, is the Battle of Cannae. In the Battle of Cannae, which is one of the most famous battles in all of antiquity, what happens is the Carthaginians and the Romans meet. The Carthaginians have a much stronger cavalry. It's from Numidia. And what Hannibal has the Carthaginians do is to slowly bow their line and give ground to the Romans who are attacking them, while the cavalry is on the flanks. The Numidian cavalry defeats the Roman cavalry and chases them off, and then they circle back. And so with a much smaller force, now Hannibal Barca has fully encircled the Romans, both with his line that caved in intentionally and the Numidians that come from behind after they rout the Roman cavalry. And so this is just like classic military strategy type. You're looking to get encirclement. It still works in World War II, right? Where that was the primary way of like really just messing up an army. And so what you have is just a huge slaughter. And in that battle, roughly, I think it's a quarter of the Roman population, the adult male Roman population, is killed. Like, this is just a terrible battle. And Hannibal continues to do this and stuff like this for the better part of a decade in Italy. But the problem is he can't lay siege to Rome itself. He doesn't have siege engines, and he doesn't have any extra support from Carthage, partially because there's no navy to support him, and partially because the bureaucracy is maybe the problem. Eventually, the Romans start invading Iberia, and they start taking chunks and chunks out of the large holdings that Hamilcar and Hannibal built over the course of a couple decades. And they rout Hannibal's brother. I think Hasdrubal was the one who was in charge of Iberia, and they take Iberia, and then they start attacking Carthage proper, and then Hannibal gets recalled. Probably shouldn't have been recalled, gets recalled. And by now, the forces of Carthage are largely diminished. There's not a lot left, and Hannibal fights eventually another general named Scipio Africanus in North Africa at the Battle of Zama or Zamia. And much in the same way, Hannibal encircled the Romans. Scipio encircles Hannibal, and Hannibal's defeated. Scipio, Hannibal, Alexander, and Pyrrhus are generally regarded as like the greatest generals of antiquity. I think there's another that's on the list, but I can't remember that. Oh, Philip II of Macedon are generally considered the best commanders. Although I think Philip and Alexander have a very significant advantage in that they had much better technology than the people they were fighting. And so that I think that's not something that's recognized as much because they had these, well, this is a bit of a tangent, but they had the Macedonian phalanx, which no one knew how to fight a giant block of soldiers that had 18-foot spears. And so that's how Philip and Alexander, they fought with that as their primary infantry. And they also had like a strong cavalry contingent thing going on. Anyways, bit of a tangent, but back to Hannibal. So they sue for peace. Carthage sues for peace, and they get a really, really bad deal that involves a huge debt. Later, it's a sort of thing where it becomes known as like a Carthaginian peace. which is a peace deal that is just designed to completely crush the opposition and make sure that it can never come to power again. I think Carthage isn't allowed to start any wars, and if they start except in Africa, and they need permission to start a war in Africa, which is exploited by the various tribes around them to raid, and because you can't do anything about it because you need to ask Rome for permission. Um, so Carthage capitulates. Um, and Then for a while, Hannibal is like an official in Carthage and doing pretty well. And then the Romans start getting scared of him, so they get the Carthaginian Senate to exile Hannibal. And I forget where Hannibal goes. He goes to some other country in the west or the eastern Mediterranean. He's still trying to build an army to attack Rome again, and eventually the Romans catch up with him, and he kills himself instead of being captured. So this is the short version of the story. Well, I guess maybe it's 15 minutes. Maybe how short is it? But this is the story of Hannibal Barca. What I really like about Hannibal Barca is, first of all, he was extremely competent, right? He was a very strong general. It's kind of hard to get that just from the story, but he's a very strong general, extremely competent, outwits the Romans over and over and over again. And so he has the competence thing. But the second thing is despite his competence, he fails. And I think that there aren't too many heroic figures like this in, I guess, like just cultural narratives or like anything like, because generally speaking, the hero always wins, and I like it when the heroes lose sometimes because that's just life. Like, that's closer to life. Life's not a Hollywood movie where the hero always comes out on top. There's just things outside your control. Like, Hannibal couldn't control the fact that even though, despite his huge wins in Italy, he couldn't control the fact that Rome was able to make gains in Iberia, or that he couldn't get reinforcements from Carthage. Like, the only thing he could do is just keep winning in Italy, and that's what he did for like a decade. There's like a couple, like I think he tried to invade Syracuse, which is like Sicily, and that wasn't too good. But for the most part, he's just crushing it in there. But he can't make progress because he needs more resources, and it just doesn't matter. And so, for me, I really like this about Hannibal Barca because he's crazy competent, but the reality is like you need other people and you need other groups in order to be successful in anything, and Hannibal was lacking in the support, and so he does poorly. Something I don't like about Hollywood movies is that you always know the good guy is going to win, and sometimes that just doesn't jive with reality. And Hollywood's about making a good story, and I like Hannibal because in some ways it's like a bad story because he loses at the end. And he loses pretty gruesomely. Like, his story is one of revenge, right? Where he is raised by his father to hate the Romans for like the terrible peace deal, and he just keeps trying to defeat the Romans even after they lose the Second Battle of Carthage, which is why he's seeking out other people to invade, which is why he's exiled, which is why he eventually has to kill himself or be captured and tortured and such. And so I like him for that reason. I also like him for a secondary reason, which is that he utilized a lot of propaganda in order to keep his army that had no business staying together. And so this includes, like, in some ways, likening himself to Hercules and Alexander. There's like a quote or a thing that's attributed to him where he was asked, "Who do you think the greatest general is?" And he said, "It's either Pyrrhus or Alexander, and then myself." And he creates this giant narrative that he is larger than life. In some ways he was, but like he's still just a man. And I think that in like one of the models I have of like just reality at large or reality for humans is that we have two types of competencies that in order to be a complete human being we need to be good at both. And one is the being a strong subject, And by subject, I don't mean like servant, I mean subject object. And being a strong subject entails being competent and being able to do things and being strong. And so, in many ways, Hannibal was strong and able to do things because he was the best general there was at the time. Because, well, or of all time by some people's accounts. But it's like, it's tough because the Romans, of course, with their stories of him, are probably going to gas him up. Because when you kill the best, it's like, it makes you look like the best. Anyways, so he is as strong as a subject, but he's also strong as an object, and that is like how he exists in the minds of other people. And my like subject object is a little bit different than like what's normal in philosophy, but in order for him to be successful in the way he was, he needs to also be able to stylize himself in such a way that he's larger than life, and that all these people who speak different languages, have different cultures, and are also for the most part just mercenaries, and they don't have any like nationalistic stake in it, because that's kind of how Carthage rolled. In order to be successful with all these people, you need to have a larger than life type story, and Hannibal was able to do that as well, right? The army he's fighting has much better the motivation, just like the baseline motivation is much better. They are getting crushed, and they are defending their homeland, and he's fighting with an army of mercenaries who like don't care. Most of them aren't Carthaginian. A lot of them are from Iberia and Numidia, and so that he was able to be so successful with this, in my mind, it paints Hannibal as like a complete individual, not just some like bloodthirsty conqueror who like was only good at that. Like Alexander, he made it as far as India, right? And he conquered huge swaths of land, but he had to turn back from India because there was a mutiny amongst his own commanders, right? This isn't something you would get with Hannibal. And so, because Hannibal's the great man. Also, Alexander, like, in order to conquer all that land, Alexander actually didn't need to win too many battles, even though the campaign was really long, because a lot of, like, it was a lot of just chopping the head off the snake and then just taking the rest. Whereas Hannibal couldn't get to the head of the snake, and so of Rome, and so instead he just keeps chopping the body off the head, and then the body regrows, or like, well, I guess that's the same thing, but like, he would just like the Battle of Cannae, he just kills a quarter of the adult male population, or maybe it's even a third. It's just this outrageous number, and then Rome just keeps coming back, and they're like, I ain't heard no bell. It's like the guy who was it the Monty Python sketch where there's like the guy who gets his arm chopped off. He's like, oh, it's only a flesh wound. That's what was like Rome, and then like Hannibal's like, what can I do? Just keep chopping their arm off, I guess. And he just keeps crushing them. And so he is competent in this like dualistic way of both like as a subject and as an object, in a way that I have a tremendous amount of admiration for. Also, he was successful as like a bureaucrat and a manager in post-Punic, in post-war Carthage, in a way that like it doesn't. It's a very. He was just competent in a very complete way, relative to, if you think about other commanders or other generals throughout history. It's not the same, and so he was quite a bit different. But the biggest thing I like is I think he was the only general in history to not win any territory and just be insanely like just also be like a huge deal. Like Alexander the Great won a ton of territory, Napoleon won a ton of territory. It's hard to make a list of someone who just won a ton of battles, didn't get a scratch of land, ended up losing the war, and is still considered one of the best generals of all time. And so I think his task was Heraclean. He rose to the task, and then he just, you get unlucky and you can't do it anyways. you know, and like if you're a fan of Stoic philosophy, you only control what you can control. Like Hannibal is also like just a great example of someone who like he controlled what he could control. Like I could just destroy every Roman army put in front of me. They just keep putting Roman armies in front of me. I can't siege Rome because he didn't have enough troops and he didn't have siege engines. You know, because you would try and surround the city and starve it out. He doesn't have enough troops to do that. He just has enough troops to just crush them in battles, and he doesn't have siege engines. Because you kind of have to stick in one place for a long time to try and conduct a siege like that, and his army wasn't big enough. Like the a lot of a lot of his army dies in the Alps. Like most of the elephants, I think just like one elephant got across, and so the elephant was really more of a propaganda piece than like a useful like military thing, you know. And so, but man, just an enormous fan of Hannibal Barca. I'm beating a dead horse. He's unsuccessful. He does everything right. He appeals to both being like competent as a subject and as an object. Love it. Love all of it. Does anyone else, for discussion, does anyone else have any of their favorite like generals from history, or individuals they think, insofar as I like kind of laid it out, which wasn't much, who they think are competent both as a subject and as an object? If anyone has anything like that that they'd like to share in the comments, that'd be great. If you like this video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz, and have a good one.